Oh man, I can't believe. Woke up again. Made it.
Got the bladder trained. We're ready to roll.
Exactly. Man, season's already flying. Week 3. That's like what, 10% of the season already? Is that right? I don't know. I was never good at math.
Something like that. Depends on how much of the preseason you count, or if we're counting this as the preseason. Still looks a little
Yeah,
bit like the preseason out there.
I
It's
know.
getting a little cleaner. The quarterback throws a little bit better, but some of it kind of looks like a pitcher early in the season, just not really hitting the strike zone, kind of hitting the
I know.
sidelines with some of these passes. It's interesting to see. Some guys get mad at their quarterback, some guys get mad at the receivers, and some guys get mad at themselves. So
Yeah. It's making our show hard to prep for every week. I feel like we go in, decent game plan. Producers do draw up a decent, rundown, but we get in there and we're like, oh crap. That was pretty wrong. I didn't see that coming. It's been hard to predict so far.
and tight ends just keep shit in the bed. I mean, they're not playing, they're
Not
not
even in the bed.
producing. They're sleeping on the floor right now.
Yeah.
I mean, sleep in a hammock or something.
Yeah.
This reminds me of when I first started playing fantasy football 20 years ago, and you just didn't even worry about tight end because it was just like you just looked for a guy that could score a touchdown. That was
Yeah.
that
It
was
was
all
all
there was to it.
matchup. Right now, totally. It feels like old school. The passing's not there. The formations aren't there. But it seems like at some point they have to unleash it all, right? We can't be scoring this little amount of points the whole season unless, again, I feel like there was a preseason meeting with all the coaches that no one told us about. And they're like, hey, guys, let's not throw it so much. We need our players in week 17 and 18.
Well, a big part of the problem too is, you know, when guys throw for 400 yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns, it's got to be a close game. You don't do
Yeah.
that in a blowout. Like once you're up 3 touchdowns, you're just going to start running the ball. So I think a lot of it's game script, and we just haven't seen these games that should be shootouts turn into shootouts. Dallas
Yeah.
didn't show up against New Orleans. Everyone's like, "Oh, New Orleans isn't for real," and it's like, "Oh, I guess it's Dallas that's not for real." That how many yards and touchdowns could Derek Carr have thrown for in that game if Dallas kept up?
Derek Carr is the number one fantasy quarterback right now, right? Like, actually, not number one fantasy.
One or two depends on the scoring system.
He's a number one quarterback right now, rating wise in the NFL. Is what I should say.
Right.
Guess how many completions he's had through 2 weeks for how great he's been and how big the blowouts.
It's like 35 or something, right?
30 completions in 2 games, and he's the best rated quarterback.
But again, he would have 50 completions if the other teams kept up with him. Like it's not that it's not that he isn't throwing because he can't. He's not throwing because he doesn't need to. So it's like if you can put up the fantasy points on 15 throws, then what's the matter? These deep balls, if you're letting them take it deep, this cover 2 is a lot of teams don't want to throw on it, and he's like, cover 2 with my guys? Hell yeah. Let's just chuck it over the top.
Or underneath the Alvin Kamara, who's made an incredible resurgence. Yeah, I mean, a lot of fantasy talk this week. A lot of we just mentioned with injuries. Some of the fantasy talks was why doesn't Robin have a collared shirt? I've upgraded. Looks like our budget's doing well. Our show is doing okay, so they gave me a collared shirt budget. I might be wearing this every single week. Hopefully, no one notices, but we'll see.
And they told us to wear the same thing. I mean, what's up with that? Like gray jacket and a light blue collared shirt. Like
they said, it's a uniform.
Nobody gave us the heads up that they were sending up both the same request. And did you get this request too? They want us to practice our names before the show. They don't like the way we're saying our names.
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
It's our name. I don't know how else we could say it.
What do they want? Like Jeff with a G. With a G, like really, really emphasize the G there.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I actually like that. You should do that. All right, right when we start, right away.
I'm Jeff with a G,
and I'm Robbie Chan. I think that goes off pretty well.
I think you need more emphasis on the Chan, a little more space in between, and emphasize the Chan.
I'm Robbie Chan.
Yeah,
sound good?
there you go. Just a little bit less space maybe in
The
between,
G,
but
little less
keep
space. All right, I'll time it out. We'll
at
I'll,
the end, right before we go live. We'll try them again one more time just to make sure.
yeah. But outside of our looks, twins, a lot of people are saying just get the backups. Everyone's going down. As we're getting on the show, we're learning more. It's endless of who's out of the game and who's not playing. And not for nothing, I think because of how this season has felt, teams are just like, whatever, let's sit him. He's hurt. Let's long haul, right? Like I've yet to see players go down like, well, they'll be back next week. It's like we're taking it week by week. I'm like, whoa, that's usually you're rushing these guys to get back on the field, and now it's like, hey, we're taking a step at a time.
Maybe the medical staff's getting paid more, so now they have more influence. Or maybe even it's the analytics combined with the medical staff, and so the analytics are saying, hey, when a guy pulls a hamstring, if you play him again in the next 2 weeks, he's 80% more likely to re-injure that hamstring. And they're like, oh, so that's why we keep re-injuring guys with their hamstrings. And I think we're 1 or 2 seasons away from seeing a hamstring be just about an instant IR stint, because so many guys are coming back 2-3 weeks later and then they re-injure it. Or, we don't want anyone to pull an Evan Ingram and just pull the hammy pregame, at least make it to the regular season.
He's not even playing 3 weeks.
Make it to kickoff.
3 weeks he's going to be out. Likely.
I might have to. I've won both my first 2 weeks with him there, putting up zeros. So I might just do it a third week.
There you go.
What else am I gonna do? Start Mike Gesicki? I mean, I might. but
a lot of people are gonna this week after what happened last week. That's the crazy part. They'll start the Isaiah Likely. Who knows what he's gonna do? People might start Gesicki over Isaiah Likely right now, and Isaiah Likely hilariously is still the number 1 tight end after putting up like 2 points last week. So. We'll
4 for 40 used to be a tight end that you wanted to leave on the waiver. Now it's like, sign me up. 4 for 40. Put him in the starting lineup. Great. You get a touchdown too. Now we're really talking.
Yeah, I know. We have I'm looking at our list. I actually prepped this week, which is crazy. There's a couple of tight ends that we're going to talk about throughout, but let's look at our overranked players here. What's on your list?
I've got Michael Pittman. Again, this guy, I don't know what he's gonna, what he did that made everybody in the fantasy landscape fall so in love with him, because all he did was catch a lot of short passes from Gardner Minshew last year, and everyone's like, oh, this guy, you got to start him. He's a top 20 guy all offseason, top 20 for what? What did he do? I mean, he took a couple of screens from the 8-yard line and scored a touchdown. Like, he's not a big play threat. He's not a touchdown scorer. He's a possession receiver. Like, he reminds me of Chris Carter when he was 40. I mean, it's just like, that's a solid guy. You need that guy on your team. If you've got a very accurate quarterback that's precision passing, great. But number 21 versus Chicago, I don't think he should be in the top 25 the rest of the season. But against Chicago, that's not a good match. I mean, the only chance he has is if they just can't throw anything deep and they just finally decide, like, all right, we've got to just dink and dunk to him, and you get 8 catches for 38 yards. I mean, hopefully you're playing in a PPR league, because that's about all the upside I see for him.
Yeah, I think also the development of Anthony Richardson, I think as a passer, it just isn't there, at least not in the first 2 weeks. He's a guy who's thrown the ball like 10 times in 2 weeks. So I just think even if he gets to the point where he's throwing the whole route tree to his receivers, I just don't think the volume is just not there. I totally agree.
Yeah, they got to find some of those quick hitters for him, the quick slants, quick screens, like something he can throw a bullet, but immediately, one read, just step and go. He doesn't need to step into it.
Yeah, for me, we talked about I think New Orleans is for real. And on my list is Alvin Kamara, number 2 against Philly. Let me preface, I do like New Orleans. I think they're pretty legit. We talked about Derek Carr. New offensive coordinator has made a huge difference. But number 2 for Alvin Kamara against Philly, who just blew the worst defense I've ever seen at the end of the game to play prevent defense on a guy who cannot walk at this point in Kirk Cousins and let him throw all over you. I think Philly's going to come out with revenge. I think Alvin Kamara will be a top 12 back, but number 2 is just really, really high. I think New Orleans comes back down to earth a little bit. It'll be a tight game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be a grinder, and I think Alvin Kamara is going to slide down quite a bit, especially with the number 2 spot. Now, if he gets to that number 2 spot again, he's then a top 3 back all season, right?
Lock him in as a top 5 back. Yeah, I mean, if he can do it against that Philly front, and he'll be able to do it, and he's not doing it as a receiver either this year. I mean, he's just been running like crazy. He's looked good.
I just don't. I guess it'll depend on, is Alvin Kamara and the New Orleans Saints that good, or is Dallas's defense that bad this year? And I think it's Dallas's defense is pretty bad this year so far. So we'll see what happens.
And who gets the lead? I mean, I could see Derek Carr going over the top on that Eagles secondary early, getting a lead, and then they're running the ball in the second half. But if the Eagles can come out first, get a lead, you could see Alvin Kamara kind of taking a back seat. Mahomes, number 4 in Atlanta. What has this guy done to be a top 5 quarterback in the last year and a half? I mean, really, ever since Travis Kelce stopped being a lock-it-in 70-yard tight end, his numbers have just shrunk. And without Tyreek Hill, that deep ball just hasn't been there. They've been searching and searching. I don't think Xavier Worthy is the answer either. I'm going to get to him in about 3 players. But number 4 in Atlanta, I think Atlanta's secondary is a lot better than people think. Pass rush, solid. It's not great, but their defense is better than people think. Primetime game, so maybe that's a little bit better, but I just don't see him throwing for 300 yards or more than 3 touchdowns anytime soon. I mean, he's really going to need to get down by like 20 points to put up a crazy fantasy numbers. Otherwise, I think he's closer to a borderline starting quarterback 12, quarterback 8, depending on the matchups. I think top 5 is just way too high for him these days.
Yeah, I do think Patrick Mahomes, I mean, it's not really that he needs to. It's their defense is so good this year. It's still really, really good. And Patrick Mahomes is just a winner. He doesn't care about stats, clearly.
He needs Chris Jones to retire to be a top fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, and look, he's going to outplay Chris Jones, but it's going to be a little bit. So he just hasn't had to do too much. And even when he has, there's been penalties that help him that don't give you fantasy points. So we'll see what happens there. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. at 10. I like him. I thought it was great that he broke out. I'm happy for a lot of fantasy owners, but let's be honest, it was against a really bad Rams defense, and it all happened in like 2 plays in the first quarter. So let's reel it in a little bit. The expectations, I think we can't go from dud to stud and now a top 10 lock-it-in wide receiver. I get in, like, Detroit's a tough defense. Like, Kyler Murray's going to be running around. It's going to actually be hilarious. This is my favorite game to watch because Kyler Murray looks like a toddler running around with a knife in his hand, and you're like chasing him. You're like, dude, you got to drop that thing, right? And then you have Aiden Hutchinson who runs like Waluigi with his arms flailing, and just you're like sprinting away from him. So I think it's going to be hilarious, and I don't think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to get that wide open on broken coverage. There was like 2 broken coverage plays. While one was a dime, don't get me wrong, across the middle, I just don't think it's going to be these massive plays against Detroit. Even, with Baker Mayfield, he just wasn't able to hit those big plays. He had to really grind these plays out. So we'll see what happens. But I just 10 is really high for such a up and down 2 weeks for him. A rookie worst.
Yeah, I think the biggest things he has going for him is Kyler Murray scrambling back there, buying extra time, 4 or 5 seconds, hard to guard anybody. We'll see how well he does in those scramble drills. I think that's where he gets a lot of his yards. And also, so many people are injured. I mean, we talked about A.J. Brown out, Tua's out, so that bumps down Tyreek Hill. So I think that's why Marvin Harrison is a top 10 receiver in rankings this week, is because there's a lot of top 10 players that are just not expected to perform like they normally would. So a few more guys.
Go through a couple of your, or like, what's the rest of your?
I got DeAndre Swift at 22 in Indy. Not seeing it for Swift. I think beyond a flex play, more of a desperation wide or running back 3.
That line is bad. That line's really bad.
I mean, just the offensive line's bad. The over/under line's bad. They're just the total points not going to be there. The offense in general, that quarterback is, already starting to hear whispers and footsteps. Like people are not thrilled on what was supposed to be the second coming, and people are kind of expecting too much out of quarterbacks. It's. I don't understand how everyone forgets what Peyton Manning did as a rookie when Eli reminds us every Monday night how many picks Peyton Manning threw his rookie year. Any chance he gets, he brings that up.
Even Tom Brady. Tom Brady has that clip has resurfaced. He's like, guys should not be starting their rookie year. Like, it's just they shouldn't be starting
them into things and into situations when they're not ready. The footwork's got to be there, the timing's got to be there, and the playbook has to be just ingrained. You got to know where those first 3 reads are without even looking at the defense. It's just got to be in your head. And so I think it's going to be a little while for Swift because he's not a pure runner. I mean, the guy has got great open field agility and speed, but the line's not blocking. He's not breaking tackles against a D lineman.
Yeah. Just before the producer's saying we got to get to our underranked, but I'll just list mine real quick. I had Kyren Williams 10 versus San Francisco. Everyone's hurt. There's no one else there. Tyreek Hill 7. I can't trust Skylar Thompson. I know they're going to draw plays, but I mean, come on. And then Jalen Hurts 3 because I think New Orleans is the real deal, and I don't think they're going to let him run that much. So I think that's a pretty decent list for me.
I've also got Xavier Worthy. Yeah, just like Patrick Mahomes, I mean, unless Worthy gets something over the top, he's just not ready. He's not a guy that you want as your number 2 receiver. You want him as your 3 or your 4, forced into that role. He's not quite ready for it. And Sam Laporta, until this guy does something, like, I'm not sure if he was the top target because they just needed a number 2 there last year, or right now everyone's just game planning to take him away and Jameson Williams is the beneficiary. But something's got to change or he's just not going to produce. I mean, the yards aren't there. The targets aren't there. The touchdowns certainly aren't there. And the touchdowns were what made him a top tight end last year. So I don't think he should be in that top 5 until he does something. But again, what tight ends are even playing? Definitely, would you rather start Isaiah Likely or Sam Laporta? I know a guy that's got that choice, and he's probably going to go with Laporta still, but another big week from Likely, and it might be Likely.
Yeah, moving into my top unranked, I do think there will be a bounce back for that Detroit offense. I think they've been sputtering a little bit, not really full potential of what they can do. But Jared Goff gets Arizona, and it's going to be a shootout. Like we talked about, Kyler Murray's going to be running around, hopefully being able to find multiple people, not just Marvin Harrison Jr., who I don't think he's going to find. But I do think Jared Goff gets it right against this terrible Arizona defense that lets up a lot of these points. And I do think some of these players come back. Now, where do these targets go? That's what I agree with. Like, we're going to have to keep an eye on where these go, but it's been going to Jameson Williams. It hasn't even been going to Amon-Ra that much either. So I do think he's a great underrated player this year or this week as 14.
Hopefully we get a shootout in that game because overdue for one and a close. Let's see 2 teams score over 30. I haven't seen that, I don't think, so far this year. Top of my list for underrated players going into this week, I've got T. Higgins. They've got him as a flex wide receiver. A lot of that is there's a lot of doubt coming into the week whether he was going to play. I think he's going to play. You never know with his hamstrings, though. If he doesn't go 100% and warm up, something's not right. They could just say, we thought he was going to go, but no, or I guess it's the ankle, right? It's the hamstring.
Hammy.
Yeah. So you never know with those hamstrings, but if he's out there and he's playing, he's got the Commanders. So I think that's a pretty safe spot to.
I mean, Joe Burrow clearly misses him, right? Like, Joe Burrow he looked okay last week, but he clearly misses his number 2 target. And, Andre Iosivas, whatever. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you got that. That's close enough,
Close enough. I can barely get our names. We were practicing earlier. Like, I think he's a good stash guy, but, he'd rather have T. Higgins out there than this big red zone target. He would like to have all 3, So I think T. Higgins is set whenever he can get on the field for a good season. It's been his story the last few years. Can he stay healthy?
Yeah, he needs T. Higgins. It's looks better when T. Higgins is out there and no Chase than it does with Chase and no Higgins. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's the height. Jamar Chase is just too small to be the lone receiver.
He had the sickest play in the playoffs too last year. So yeah, definitely. Carson Steele coming out. Here it is. Is this the hype that everyone was talking about? I do agree Patrick Mahomes doesn't need to do much because they're running the ball a lot too, right? And if Carson Steele, who had a horrible fumble last week, is the guy, then let's see what all this, training camp hype is all about. So at 31, a guy who's going to get, I would say, about 12 carries, it sounds like, to 14. I think at 31 versus Atlanta, they're going to try to grind the ball and keep the ball out of, Bijan Robinson's hands as much as they can. So I like Carson Steele at 31. I think that's going to be a real low ranking for him when the day's done.
If he's their starting running back, 31 is way too low. If he's still just their fullback, then 31 might be too high. It's hard to know how that running back split's going to work out, but at least we got some clarity going into the week. Kareem Hunt not going to be elevated to the active roster. He's still in the practice squad, so at the very least, Steele's getting 10 carries. I mean, there's no way they're just going to.
Could you imagine if Kareem Hunt
all season?
Yeah, could you imagine if Kareem Hunt's like got off his couch this week? He's like, all right, time to go play for the Kansas City Chiefs.
It would be wild. I don't think we're going to see the old Hunt back, but it would be fun to see it for sure. David Montgomery, 25 at Arizona. Yeah. This guy, why is he a flex back? The guy, all he does is produce. He gets 13 carries, couple catches a game. He's good for 15 touches a game and about a half a touchdown. Right now, he's probably going to average a little bit over that by the end of the year because he's overdue for a multi-touchdown game. We saw him blow up for 3 once last year with this team. So I think it's a great split, great setup, and really just about any week, as long as Detroit doesn't get shut out, he's got as good a chance as anybody of scoring a touchdown.
Yeah, David Montgomery continues to get disrespected, right? Because he's not the Jahmyr Gibbs guy, but he is the most consistent on that team. He is the heart of that team. And when you're on the goal line, sorry, Gibbs, you're not getting the ball. It's David Montgomery. So I definitely think
6-minute offense, like you could burn the clock. Like it's going to be time for Montgomery to rack up those carries.
All right, this next one, I get the matchup. I can understand why he's so low. But J.K. Dobbins is the number 1 running back right now. And he's at 17 against, I get it, Pittsburgh's a tougher defense, but come on. In what world does the number 1 rushing leader get a 17 spot, right? Through 2 weeks. That's crazy. And it's not just 1 week. He has done it multiple weeks, 2 weeks in a row, 100+ yards. I think 17 is very disrespectful. And I think J.K. Dobbins starts climbing the ladder after this Pitt game.
He's just splitting carries with Gus Edwards, so that's what's got people a little bit fearful. He started the preseason process so low because everyone's afraid of injuries, but he's healthy right now. So as long as he's healthy, he's probably a top 10 running back. Like he's torn up Pittsburgh for years when he was in Baltimore. They're going to run the ball. No matter what, there's going to be a lot of running in this game. I mean, the biggest problem is this game could end up 9-6. Like that could be ugly. Could look more like a rugby scrum than a football game out there. So we'll see what that final tally is. But if there's a touchdown scored in that game, I'm betting it's J.K. Dobbins or maybe George Pickens getting loose on a deep ball. But we got Derek Carr, 13th versus Philly.
Yeah.
No secondary, no pass rush. Number 1 to 3 quarterback, depending on your scoring system. What am I missing here? This guy's still not ranked as a starter. Like, get him inside the top 10, get him inside the top, 7, 8, maybe. I mean,
at least top 10. Come on.
It's very hard to justify starting him over over Patrick Mahomes. But if you did a blind resume and we're just looking at the numbers, not the names, you'd be starting Derek Carr all day. So better receivers, I think, than Patrick Mahomes right now, better offensive system, and it's going to take a while for the rest of the NFL to catch up to what New Orleans is doing, and they've seen something that nobody else has. Like, hey, you want to play these deep zones? We'll throw over the top of them, and it's been impressive, and I think he's going to keep rolling.
Yeah, look, I do think also against Philly, it will be a closer game. I mean, I would assume Philly, holds on to the ball long time, eats a lot of clock. So Derek Carr is going to be going, and it's going to have to follow that script and see what happens. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity for Derek Carr. If Derek Carr can do what he's doing with 30 completions so far, I think we should give him some respect. I do. New Orleans, no one wants to respect them yet, but I think this week they're going to regret they have it. I like Cam Akers. He's number 42. I know he's 42 because it's been in flux with will Joe Mixon play, will Dameon Pierce play. It looks like he's the guy again for Houston. Look, he had also a terrible fumble on near the goal line Sunday night, but I do think that Cam Akers, for one, clearly is a head case because how the heck is this guy the third running back on the team at 25 years old after being one of the best? But he still has the skills, and Houston uses their running backs a lot, as we saw in week 1. So I think he's going to be great.
Yeah, and we do have the updates there. As Pierce is out, and Mixon expected to be out, and so they've got Akers moved up to about RB20, a little bit better, but still, I mean, this guy's, I think, start him. He's the only healthy running back there, and great team, great offense. So I think it's good to roll out there in your starting lineups. Quickly here, our last two. I've got Mike Gesicki versus the Commanders.
You love this guy.
15, he had a touchdown overturned week 1. If it weren't for that, he'd be top 5 tight end for the year. He's still number 8, and people have been scared by him so many times. They think he's going to go off, and it's never been the year. I think this is the year. I think Burrow's finally realized he needs a tight end to take advantage of what defenses do, and I'm not worried about T. Higgins being there. I think he wants to throw the ball around the yard to as many people as he can. Gesicki's got the athleticism and the size to get it done. And Jaylen Warren at 35 in that game we talked about earlier, it's going to be slow, grind it, but I do think that the Chargers are going to be out in front, and it's going to be more of a Warren game than Najee Harris. They're going to have to throw those check downs to him, get him more involved, and he looks healthier and healthier as he gets off that hamstring.
Yeah, I agree. Warren did look so healthy, so I do like that. I also have Deontay Johnson. Can't be worse than what it's been. We got Red Rocket throwing the ball now, so let's see if it helps. I think he's a little underrated there as well. So let's see how the Carolina Panthers. I feel bad for everyone there now. So I hope there's a bright spot coming. A lot of guys to add, maybe. What do you got?
I got the before mentioned Bryce Young. Get him in Dynasty. He's on the bench. He's going to be on the bench for a while. If you need a QB 3 or 4, he's got a stash. He's going to be a starter again someday, whether it's in Carolina, who knows? But at the end of the season, there's going to be quite a few teams looking for quarterbacks. I think he's going to fall to one of those teams, if not get a shot again later this season.
Yeah.
Braylon Allen, after last week, everyone was going to be just way too excited to let him go. After Thursday night's game, he looks a little bit more like a backup, and as long as Breece Hall is there, people are going to say he's never going to be the starter. Well, Breece Hall could get hurt. He could get traded. Braylon Allen could get traded. There's all sorts of things that happen, but it's the talent. I mean, right now he looks like the most talented rookie running back in this whole class. Like, I think he looks great, electric, and I'm shocked every time somebody says he's 235 pounds. That is not the way a 235-pound running back was built even 3, 4, 5 years ago. I mean, he is just speed, upper body, just does not look like a 230-pound man. It must be all muscle. And Christian Watson, this guy has been slow starter. He's been banged up with hamstrings in the past. I think he's healthy now. Once Jordan Love's back, I think this is the year we're going to finally see that explosion connection with him and Love that we've been waiting to see. Or if not, maybe he'll get traded to the Jets.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I do think Jets seem like a 2 running back team. It's trending that way, so definitely there. I like Josh Downs. He's coming off an injury this week. You talked about, Michael Pittman, not a lot of middle of the field. Josh Downs is going to be a big, deep threat. Give the Indy something back there. Talk about tight ends. Brenton Stang. I like to say his name, and I like that I don't know when Jacksonville will get back. Who's their starter?
Evan Ingram.
Evan Ingram. I don't know when they're gonna get back. He's a good guy to get right now. He's in his second year in the NFL. He's pretty solid so far, being in there. And then Bucky Irving. I like Bucky Irving. I think Rachaad White is not a very efficient runner. I think they need an efficient runner. Rachaad White still has a spot there, but I think Bucky Irving got his shot against Detroit, and he looked really great. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry in his short little amount of time, and that's like 5 more yards per carry than Rachaad White has. So I do like Bucky Irving to stash right now. He's going to trend really high here soon.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time before Bucky Irving and Rachaad White look more like Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. Yeah. It's going to be Irving with the early down, pound it roll, and White's going to be more of the receiving back. They didn't spend a ton of draft capital on him. He had a good year last year, but they're interested in winning, not our fantasy teams and where guys were drafted in the fantasy process. So I think White's going to take more of that third down running back role here going forward.
All right. We're ready?
We got anything else? We're running out of time. Practice our name one more time.
All right.
I'm Jeff with a G.
And I'm Robbie Chan. That work? All right.
Get closer. We'll do it live.
All right.
Do it live.